Just checked out the first episode of Chasing the Sun, Season 1, Episode 1, and I absolutely loved it. I love the entire holistic view from Razzie to Sia to the South African team and the entire culture of the nation of South Africa. It just really gave me an in-depth knowledge and insight to what goes behind the team, the nation, and the players involved in it. And I'm going to break this video up into 3 different sections, just have a smooth stream of consciousness in a sense. I'm going to talk about the pre-coaching wherein Razzie was in Ireland, the decision when he decided to take over South African rugby for the World Cup in 2019, and then the transformation process of, Razzie getting, appointing Sia as the captain, and then the entire nation backing in that whole process. And I'll sprinkle my thoughts throughout this, and also, sort of recap at the end in a sense. But going into the pre-coaching phase, they started out the documentary 36 months out from the 2019 World Cup. Razzie made the decision to move himself and his entire family to Ireland, where he became the director of coaching, or the director of rugby, in Ireland for Munster. And I can just imagine, the amount of pressure and stress that he had to be under in that time, because for him to uproot his entire life and his family and move them into an entirely different country and coach a different nation's team had to be very tough, right? Because he played for South Africa as an athlete, coached, and was born and raised in that country. So for him to move and make that decision to leave, it had to be very difficult on him. And he highlighted a little bit what the motives were behind that move, because he saw that the organization and the politics that they had in place at South Africa within the rugby nation at that time were stagnant. He didn't see a path forward where they were gonna change their thought process, and they were just stuck in that same pattern with not really a path to move forward and grow the team. So it's going to be the same cycle year in and year out. And that's why he just wanted to sort of uproot and move his life. And I just have to applaud him for that decision, because that is a very difficult thing to do, and completely just move your life. And he was even talking about getting citizenship in Ireland at that point without any plan of going back to South Africa. And I just find it so interesting to where he was talking about that game where South Africa was pretty much at their low point, right? They're at their lowest point. They come over and they play in Dublin. They play Ireland in Ireland. And Razzie mentioned, sort of being in a position he's never been in before in his life, where he's in the middle of his fans, his people, the South African fan base. Ireland's on one side, his people are on the other. And Ireland absolutely just dismantled South Africa, right? They were out of sorts, they weren't in form. And he looked up at his fans, his people, his nation, and he just saw like the despair, the agony, the anguish in their eyes. Like after that loss, he said, it was almost like emotionless in a sense. They just got up, walked out the stadium, went to their hotel rooms, went back to sleep, and that thought sparked him, and he just had that conversation. It's like, we have to do something for our people. Seeing your people in such a state of despair and agony has to be just like gut-wrenching, right? And to be in a rival country, right? You're coaching the rival team against your home team. That has to be just one of those, it has to put you in a different state of mind, because you're essentially coaching against your own people, right? And so when he saw that, he made the decision that he was going to go back to South Africa, take over the helm again, and win his nation that World Cup, just because he saw the displeasure, just the pain in his people's eyes. And that would just suck the soul out of anybody, right? And I think that's one of those things where you see it in life when you're going through something, as Razzie was, where you feel like you're going through the mud. Things aren't changing. The political climate's not changing. It becomes a frustrating thing, because when you're not seeing progress, things are stagnant, and it forces you to move around. But it's wild how life unfolds, right? If he didn't move, he wouldn't have been able to see what he saw at that Ireland game, seeing his people in that pain and forcing him to have that idea of coming back and making that shift. So it's one of those things that life unfolds for you in a sense. And for Razzie, it unfolded for him because it gave him that feeling of just like, I have to do something. I have to re-inspire a nation and do whatever it takes to get us back to being recognized as a top rugby team in the world, and just getting things on track to inspire and fulfill a nation, and also fulfill that feeling that he had, after leaving that game. It has to be a tough feeling. And now I'm going to roll into when he finally took the coaching job. I love how they highlighted the players. They have the black players, and they were talking about their struggle as athletes being and playing and representing that nation. They're coming a nation to where, I'm not too familiar with all the politics within South Africa, but I do know about apartheid, the segregation that happened during that time, and that may still be happening at that time. But they were referencing how there was that segregation happening where they were playing for a nation, but they were also being downgraded in that society. They were being called, names that weren't favorable, like racist terms, and how Razzie was able to overcome that political climate, not only from the rugby standpoint, but from the country standpoint, and look at it like, we're going to bring the nation together through this team. So as he called it, he built a meritocracy, letting players get on the field based off their merit, not based on their skin color, where they come from, who they are, their popularity. He built it off of their merit, not like as a meritocracy. And if you are familiar with the book by Ray Dalio called Principles, he talks a lot about that, where he builds his organizations. Ray Dalio is a super successful wealth fund manager, and it's just a mega billionaire here in America. And his book Principles talks about how he built that company based on a meritocracy, and having radical candor and transparency in an organization to know what you did well and what you didn't do well, and having that open stream of feedback so you can continue to improve and grow through a career based off of your results, both positive and negative. And that's what Razzie implemented in his system. And that's the thought that just came to my mind, was like, you need people like that in the world. Are you able to open the floor, have the conversations that need to be had, and not just sort of like having that elephant in the room in sense, like, there's a divide politically, there's a segregation, and that's something that can divide a nation, divide a locker room. And for a man like Razzie to recognize it and then bring it to intention and have those conversations, that openness, it really brings down the veil, right, in a room, but where you have your face to have those tough conversations, right? You have to have the tough conversations. And for him to do that was absolutely incredible. And I see that was like the beginning block of like what they call that transformation in the beginning episode of this documentary, which I absolutely loved. And he got the players, both the black side, the white side, to come together. And for him to appoint Siya Kolisi, and hearing Siya Kolisi's story was absolutely incredible and awe-inspiring. Coming from an impoverished background, come from mega poverty, didn't have the comfort growing up in life. And he mentioned that story about how his grandmother was just a huge pillar in his life. Someone that was caring, loving, and looked out for him. And he didn't even have food to eat as a child, right? And his grandmother just told him just to drink sugar water to hold him over to get him to the next day. Hearing stories like that and seeing, the amount of struggle and adversity that, not only Siya goes through and he went through because they highlighted it, but that people go through in a nation it gives us a lot of insight, man, because, coming from the background I come from, living in America, there's a lot of advantages that we have being American. And just from the family I come from a great middle-class family, military family, nursing. There was a lot that I've had in life, right? And so I didn't have to think about where the next meal was coming from. I had the love from my parents, my brothers and sisters. I had all the things around me that created a safety net, a security in my life, right? And then going to another part of the world to where it's like a third world, right? Where Siya grew up, didn't really have the food, the comfort, the clothing, the support, the backing, but yet he was still able to overcome that. That's so inspiring to see, right? We all have advantages and disadvantages in life, and some people have it worse or better, but seeing what Sia came from, basically absolutely nothing, and becoming appointed as the captain, the first black captain of the South African team, that is something that is transforming of a nation, a culture. It inspires so many people. Yeah, and I saw that they interviewed what they call like the Black Nation of South Africa, and just seeing the amount of pride, the joy, the light that appointment brought to not only just the nation, the team, but the entire nation, was absolutely incredible to see. And you see it just filled people with just so much hope. And that's the thing about like that decision that Rassie made. He gave hope to an entire nation, a nation of people that maybe feel overlooked to, in a sense. And I'm talking about like the Black Nation of South Africa. They felt overlooked, they felt underserved, they felt like they were just continuing to beat down. But for Rassie to do a move like that and say like, hey, we're all in this together as a nation. This is going to be the team that brings South Africa rugby to a World Cup, and inspiring that nation to come together and to gel. That just takes melons, man. That's all I can say. That just takes melons. And for Rassie to do that and bring Sia Khaleesi on as the captain is absolutely incredible. And I saw it's not only a big moment for black athletes, it was a big moment for South Africa as a whole to have those conversations brought to a forefront, not only in the rugby locker room, but brought to the mainstream media as well. Because the mainstream media, I saw they were calling it, is this a political move? Is it this? And peeling it back, going to Rassie, going back to Sia, there was no political intent behind it. It was just built on merit. It was built off of the player. It was built off of the hard work that they saw and do day in and day out. So that's what I really loved about that. And I love the part where they're 18 months out and they go to England to go play England. It was one of those pivotal moments where South Africa is still in that rebuilding process. It's Sia's first game as the captain of South Africa. Rassie's put his neck on the line in a sense. And I just love how that locker room, they showed Eben Etzebeth, all the athletes, they supported one another. That's what I loved, is that they believed in one another. Eben talked about, he's like, there's no question in the locker room. We got behind him. I love the man as a player. I love him as a person. We're here to support one another. And that's those initial building blocks that are so cool to see. It's just like that, the background things that are happening. I absolutely love that. And then for them going to England started off with an incredible pace, basically like blew the doors off of South Africa. But that mindset that would ingrain from not only Rassie being a coach, but the bond that the players have for one another, the pride that they have, the strength that they have to say, no matter how this game ends, we're getting beat right now. We're not going to embarrass ourselves. We're not going to give up in front of our fans, and we're not going to give up on each other. And they fought back and came back to beat England in that game. And that was just like that initial breaking the wedge, right? Breaking the wedge, breaking the dam, and saying like, hey, this is the hope that we needed. I absolutely love that part. And even just fast forwarding, as they're going and getting ready for New Zealand, which is that huge rivalry. They're talking about, Rassie mentioned like a lot of the stuff he had, which I love the honesty, was a lot of the stuff he had was unplanned. He's like, we lost to Australia, which was, I think, sort of like they mentioned like a middle of the road team at that time. But then they had to look forward to New Zealand, which was a team that they haven't won in New Zealand. And the 3 test matches total in New Zealand that they won from this time point. And they lost to Australia, but then they had to go to New Zealand and play them on their territory, a place where they've never won or rarely won, and had to overcome that battle. And for them to go over to New Zealand in such a heated, just a passionate territory, and try to take the team from where they were at that point and go against a powerhouse like that, and mentioning like everything that went into the mindset of getting the team prepared, and just sort of like the fear in a sense of the nation, were saying like, if we can't beat Australia, how in the heck are we going to go over there and beat New Zealand? And that New Zealand match was the one where I saw it just built so much pride, and it gave not only the nation hope, it gave the team hope, and saying like, we're moving in the right direction, because it proved that the players on the field were were completely bought into that system. It proved to Razzie that he was bought into the system as well, that he mentioned, like, what we're doing is working. The players are behind it. I'm behind it. Our nation's now getting behind it. And to go in there on heated turf and to beat New Zealand in New Zealand, that was just an absolutely incredible event to see, just from how they showcased it in the documentary, where they're in that final stand right there at the try line. New Zealand is just right on that 1 meter line, and they're going back and forth, neck and neck. And South Africa gets that knock, and they just kick the ball out and win the game on rival turf. That was just so incredible to see, and just the amount of tension that went into that moment. And it was just sort of like that deep breath, that sigh, that relief of winning that game and showing, like, man, we're on the right track and we're gonna get these things motoring. And I just, like, before I got into rugby, I was just thinking about it. Like, I did not realize how involved the nations were, how much rugby means to a nation, as far as, like, how you just take it and it's you embody what rugby means. It's not just a sport, right, is what I've noticed from looking at South Africa, looking at New Zealand, looking at Australia, Wales, how your countries are, you are rugby. It shows who you are, what you are. It's almost like it's defining, right? And it's not just a sport, it's a culture. It's representative of your people, of your land, of your nation. And I absolutely love that. Before getting into rugby, I looked at a few documentaries, like the one they had, like All Access on New Zealand All Blacks, and I saw the insights, like the money they're getting paid, the games. And I looked at it just from a spectator aspect, because being exposed to our game here in America, we look at football, we like, my team is the Oakland Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders. My college football team are the Miami Hurricanes. We're passionate about our football, but it's not like live or die, right? Like, they'll win a game, they'll win a Super Bowl. Yeah, we'll celebrate, and then we go on with our days after that, right? But as I've gotten into rugby, I see the culture is just so embedded in your psyche, in your society, in your nation, and I absolutely love what rugby means and how it defines and uplifts a nation, right? It brings the nations together, and that's what I'm absolutely loving about this rugby journey. And I feel like this documentary does an amazing job of showcasing that, right? I know it's all about South Africa, but I look at it from a holistic view of every nation, what your team means to you and what it represents for your country, and like the amount of pride that it brings your country, and just how it brings a nation together. Because having the right people in place, how they brought Razzie on, which was one element. Then Razzie, appoints Siya Kolisi, and Siya Kolisi brings in the entire black nation of South Africa to support him, and then to be recognized as a nation. Then it also brings the media in for South Africa, to where they start having those conversations. And then you see how South Africa starts to build that bond together of the black South Africans, the white South Africans, and just South Africa as a whole. And they gel as a unit and say, you know what, we're not segregated anymore. We are a nation, and all these men are representing our nation as a whole, and that's something that we can stand behind. So I absolutely love this episode, Qrew, and I'm excited to finish this one out as we get to episode 2 through 5 on this first season, and then we'll roll into the season 2 and unfold those 5 episodes, Qrew. But I love you, I appreciate you, and thank you so much for dialing me into this documentary. And I want to know your thoughts in the comments below, Qrew. I love having those conversations with you. Is there anything that I missed, or any other insights that you have from living in South Africa and experiencing this during this transformation and transition period, Qrew? Thank you for continued support. Right, QSN, we are in rugby full time, and I'm absolutely loving the journey and being here with you, Qrew. We'll continue to grow and have fun together. I love you. I appreciate you. Always stay laser focused on your dreams and your vision, and remember that you're in control. Catch you on the next one. All right, peace.